Thank you for your patience, everyone. We'll call the budget hearings meeting to order in open session. Supervisor Brown, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Anyone wishing to speak in public comment? This time is for information from the public on matters not appearing on the agenda. All comments are limited to 3 minutes and must pertain to matters within the jurisdiction of the board. When addressing the board, please state your name for the record and address the board as a whole through the chair. No action or discussion will be conducted on matters not listed on the agenda. However, the chair may refer the matter to the appropriate department for follow-up or schedule the matter on a subsequent board agenda. Good morning.
Good morning, Kate Graves from Lewiston. I have a question. Well, let me start off with some history a bit. So, Judy Pfluger, when she was supervisor, and we had these budget meetings that went on for days, opened up her budget and was looking at it and said, I like the new format, I understand it better. And I was just shocked. What do you mean that you understand it better? You should understand it completely. And I realize it's complicated, and since that time, the county's budget has tripled, which is also shocking. And I'm just thinking that how can you understand what the budget is fully and completely when most of your budget isn't names of people? When you have people, it's numbers. You have the department head names and most everybody else's numbers. So if I gave you an example of, suppose hypothetically Frank Lynch, who retired, came back and worked as a contractor. Would you know he did? Because he's just a number. Yet you guys have the fiduciary responsibility. You guys are responsible for hiring where the money goes. The buck stops up there. So if a person comes back as a contractor, can they be a contractor more than once? If they were, would you know that? So my question is, do you actually know who you guys are employing in your budget? Do you know how often they're employed under different numbers? I know your county council is employed under several different numbers. And I'm just wondering if you guys, because I can't see it, I'm wondering if you guys can't and you should. So if you cannot, that needs to be brought out and explained to you and very clear to you. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, anyone else? All right, moving on to county matters. These items include non-routine or controversial matters that are listed alphabetically by department. A member of the board, staff, or public may request that an item be heard out of order while there's only one item. So we'll move on to 1.1 under County Administrative Office, conduct budget hearings for consideration of the recommended budget for fiscal year 2019-2020. Recommended expenditures including contingency total $131,310,953. Okay, so the budget committee worked for the last quite a few months with all the department heads on this. Good work, everyone. You know, you guys were, and your heads buried in all kinds of numbers. So I'll turn it over to you, Richard, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Yes, the budget team worked for several months with the contract assistance of Craig. I want to thank our department heads for bringing in wonderful budgets. That's why we're sitting up here with no appeals, I believe. No other members out there. They've done a wonderful job. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Craig. He has a PowerPoint which will in-depthly describe what we're proposing this year.
Good morning, Craig.
Good morning, Madam Chair and board members. Can you hear me? Everybody hear out there? Fairly? I don't want to lean like this the whole time, but can we turn it up a little bit or without speaking? All right. Testing. Is better out there now? Yes. Okay, cool. All right, so welcome to fiscal year 2019-2020 budget hearings. I'm going to just kind of jump right into it and give you a high flyby of the top, and then what you'll see is this presentation is much like the last 3 years. few items have changed, but for the majority, it's business as usual. All funds, the total budget number that was just mentioned, I'm gonna truncate it for you, 131.3 million. That deals with all funds under the control of the Board of Supervisors. So that's general fund, all special revenue funds, debt service fund, capital project funds, enterprise funds, internal service funds, dependent special districts. That's the districts where the board sits as the governing body. This budget does not include schools, independent special districts, which means the board is not the governing board. They have their own elected board, and any agency funds that we hold as required by law. This budget's been compiled in accordance with the County Budget Act, which is in government code, and all 58 counties are required to follow that. The total budget amount, as we've talked about, is $131.3 million, which is significantly higher than last year and the year before. So in fact, it's 11.2% higher than last year. Debt service payments in this budget are fully funded, and the budget, of the total budget, 30% of it deals with salaries and benefits of the county. So let's break into the expenditure side of this, and once again, this is the total budget. This is everything. It includes general fund and all other funds under the board's authority. So when we break these out, I've got percentages there that you can easily read, and I don't want to read those percentages to you, but I kind of want to give you a context of what's in those percentages. And so starting with general government, we're talking about, let me talk about two things, because you have a budget book or you have access to the budget book. This presentation splits out that little silver that's brown there, general fund contributions to others. Those are transfers coming out of the general fund that are going to non-general fund funds to support those programs, okay? Things like matches, grant match, required matches in code, those types of things. So I've split out general government and the general fund contributions, but in your budget book, those numbers are shown together. So that number together is $32.8 million, okay? Of that number, the sliver that is the general fund contribution is about $900,000 that's being, like I said, transferred out, which takes our number down to 31.9, that equals that 24.27%. I'm going to go around real quick and I'm going to come back to this one, because you're going to see that there's stuff in here that you need to be aware of that you need to really back out, because it's not truly general government. Public protection is 18.9 million, and it equals that 14.39%. In public ways and facilities, it's 38.4 million, that's comprising that 29.28%. Health and sanitation is 20 million. Public assistance is 19.6 million. The debt service is 700,000. Education is about 400,000, and the contingency is about 500,000. So those are the round numbers quickly for you. Going back into the general fund, since that's 31.9 million, you need to understand that 17.5 million of that number is the new jail construction that's happening in 1920. That takes us down to 14.4 million that is a more true operations of general government number for this year's budget. Also, in the public ways and facilities label, 38.4 million includes 25.3 million in road and airport projects, and 3.1 million for the cannabis permit program expenses. All right, so you'll see it again broke out here. The major budget components in this $131.3 million budget is 24.3 million for roads and airport projects, 17.5 for the new jail construction, 16.9 million for transfers within county funds. 39.4 million is for salaries and benefits. That's the number that's about 30% of the total budget. 17.2 million is in the general fund. That's about, it accounts for 62.6% of our general fund budget. 22.2 million non-general fund portion of salaries and benefits is 21.4% of their budgets. The increase to OPEB, we have increased in this budget to fully pay the actuarial determined contribution for OPEB to 100%. One of the reasons we did that is you can see that our unfunded OPEB liability as audited in June 30, 2018 was $67.7 million. We expect that number to drop over $20 million now that we are fully funded once the next actuarial report comes.
Can you explain briefly for the public what OPEB stands for and what it really means?
Yeah, OPEB is the other post-employment benefits other than retirement. So what that means is any type of post-retirement benefit such as medical insurance, vision, dental, those types of things that are in agreements and contracts with employee groups, with bargaining groups, to be paid after they retire if they meet the qualifications for those. This is basically the projection of what the total cost of that is as of right at the measuring point of that actuarial report. Is that?
Yep, thank you so much.
So now, the reason that we get that $20 million decrease, and you heard me talk about the new standard, I believe it was last year, perhaps the year before. The standard changes the discount rate that you can use, and the discount rate that we have to use currently is around 3.6%. Now that we're 100% of the actuarially determined contribution, our discount rate jumps up to 6%. And by having a higher discount rate, it lowers our overall unfunded liability amount, just simply by valuation, okay? The last bullet there is CalPERS. We have another 0.8% reduction, and we are now in the second year of this. The first year it cost us around $460,000. The second year is costing us an additional $530,000. So you add those two for the second year, okay? And we'll talk about the third year later in another slide.
I'm sorry, could you also briefly explain what that discount rate means, where it came from?
Okay, so you're talking about the OPEB discount rate?
The CalPERS.
Okay, so the CalPERS discount rate is set by the CalPERS rate standard setting board. It goes before them, and it was at 7.5%. Historically, it's been at 7.5% for forever.
Right.
Some time ago, I could look up the date, but I didn't bring CAFR with me. The board voted to reduce that discount rate. What they're finding, the discount rate is an attempt to project what they're going to earn on the assets that they have. And so historically they've been having no problems to hit the 7.5, but more recently they have not been able to hit the 7.5, so they're wanting to lower that discount rate to more correctly reflect the actual unfunded liability. And so they're reducing it from 7.5% to 7% over a 3-year period by using 1/8%, 1/8%, and 1/4%.
Great.
So it's purely established by the PERS board.
I just wanted to make sure that was clear. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, so I've added this slide in the current year because I wanted to kind of talk a little bit more so that you understand when we talk about major budget components and how they impact the numbers that you see as a total budget, because we've already heard a comment from the public that, you know, over time the county budget has tripled, and I don't know the exact truth of that number. I don't have those numbers in front of me, but I do know that it is growing. And so we're $131.3 million in this current year. You need to understand what that's comprised of and how we get to that number. So the first thing you need to understand is we talked about the transfers, the $16.9 million for transfers within county funds. Now this is an important concept. Transfers have to be budgeted based on the County Budget Act, okay? All a transfer does is it moves money from one fund, one county fund, to another county fund. If you think about it in your own aspect, if you had 3 bank accounts and you needed to cut a check out of bank account 3 but it had no money in it, you'd have to move the money from checking account 1 or 2 over to 3. That's the transfer. So you have both a transfer in, which is the deposit side or revenue side, and a transfer out, which is the expenditure side. What happens is transfers have a tendency to inflate your budget when all it's doing is moving money around within your bank accounts internally to your organization. So if we go 131.3 million less the 16.9, we come down to 114.4 million that's actually gonna go potentially outside of our county entity for expenditure purposes, okay? Of that 114.4, we're in the middle of a large jail construction project that's gonna take 17.5 million of that 114. And our transportation department has received money for SB1 and for federal emergency dollars that have been received to work on the road and airport projects that are listed at 25.3 million. Okay, with that said, that leaves us 71.6 million left to fund the balance of county operations. So you can already see just in those three items, we're almost at half the budget, okay? And so it's important that I show that to you so you understand what the difference is, these one-time costs, or in the case of the road and airport projects, we've had those before where they're much lower, they're 13 or 12 million, and they're so high because of the SB1 released money that now we're gonna be able to spend. All right, so let me go back. So once again, the 71.6 million at the bottom, this also includes general fund, right? So now we're gonna move to the part of the presentation that actually splits general fund out by itself. And so here we have general fund revenue of 23,933,070. Basically 23.9 million. And you once again see the percentages, but I want to give you some numbers there to go with those. 40% taxes is what is coming up to $9.8 million of that 23.9. License and permits amount to 867,000. The use of money and property, which is interest earned on money in our bank accounts, and also rental of facilities, whether they're memorial halls or other buildings, that amounts to 221,000. Fines and forfeitures, that 0.27% amount, amounts to 69,000. And then we get into the intergovernmental revenues, which are federal and state and other government revenues that are derived by our programs within the general fund. That amounts to 2.85 million. The charges for current services, this would be like charges for papers, certified copies of things, any type of specific services that we're allowed to recover our costs. We can't recover a profit, but we recover our cost on these items, is 5.4 million. Miscellaneous revenues, those that don't fit particularly easily in either of the other categories, are 706,000. Transfers here, once again, these are the same types of transfers. In this case, it's transfers coming into the general fund, is $4 million. The majority of those transfers in are going to be coming from the Health and Human Services Department for Public Health and their programs, as well as Sheriff Department, potentially coming in from their grant programs, and DA as well from a grant program.
Craig, I have a quick question from Supervisors.
Yes.
Could you give an example of your other financing sources?
Okay, so an example of another financing source would be if we had issued debt, we would have had debt proceeds. Those would have been recorded in budget purposes as revenue or other financial sources. We didn't have any in the current year. Or we don't anticipate any in the current year. Any other questions on this one? All right, general fund revenue, 5-year trends. So this just kind of gives you perspective on where our general fund revenues have gone over the last few years, and they've been relatively consistent. If you look at, particularly since 15-16 forward, I can explain to you the 17-18 blip up there, the one that goes to about 28.5 million. In that is the one-time PILT money that we received that was 1.4 million. And there's also a PILT year in there. There was a change from our external auditor that they required that wherever the PILT money came in, whenever it was deposited, it belonged there, even though the feds say it's paying for lost property taxes in properties that they have taken off of the roll. The external auditors have said, no, wherever it lands, it lands. So that's a one-time spike and a one-time double up, which is giving that large amount there. Otherwise, you can tell they're pretty much consistent from year to year. We have another slide that'll break this up because this is both discretionary and non-discretionary revenues in the general fund. So the variance you're seeing is more clearly identified in the next slide. Here, you can see that the dark red portion is our discretionary revenue. And you can see from 15-16, it pretty much hovers around 10 and 11 million except for the 17-18 blip, of which PILT is discretionary revenue. And therefore, that 1.4 million higher, if we took that off of 17-18, which had 12.2 million, that would put it back down to 10.8. And so without that extra PILT payment in there, we would read 10 million, 10.3, 10.8, 11.1, and 10.9. So we're hovering between 10 and 11 million of discretionary revenue. This is our revenue concern, that our revenues are flat, our discretionary revenues are flat. You can see that the lighter colored red, or the pink, or whatever that color is, that's where your fluctuations are coming to really exaggerate the growth in the general fund. And those are coming from intergovernmental revenues, charges for services, those types of things, mainly state and federal money. So, and once again, because our health department is a general fund department and the sheriff's in the general fund, they have state and federal monies that they get that are making these numbers jump. And it varies year to year, as you can tell for them as well. You'll see that difference in another chart I have later. This is the property tax apportionment. If you look at every dollar of property tax that comes in, this is how it's divided. 64% to the school, 32 to the county, and 4 are spread out amongst the various special districts. These percentages have been consistent for the last 10 years, I believe, that I've been here. All right, the general fund expenditure side. So once again, you have the percentages there, but I want to go through and kind of help you understand the amounts behind those. So in the general government, let's do the general fund contribution amount, the 3.5%. That is $920,000. It's the same number we've been seeing throughout, the 0.9 million, if you will. And that leaves 6.3 million of actual general government expense that the general fund is paying for. In public protection, it's 56.63%. 15.5 million is being spent in this category. It's important to note, this doesn't mean only public safety departments. There are other departments that are in public protection, such as the assessor, the clerk recorder, to guarantee that your property is recorded properly. It's a protection to you. Public ways and facilities, this is a very small number that we do miscellaneous public works projects in the county, and that amounts to $71,000 currently in the general fund. The health and sanitation amount is 3.6 million, and once again, this is monies that usually are coming in via transfer from the health department's special revenue funds. Public assistance, a very small amount of 66,000, both of which the health and sanitation in the health department and the public assistance area, we have small matches that we're required to do for realignment purposes. The education amount, 412, that's primarily the library and cooperative extension. And then once again, we have a contingency fund this year of 500,000. We got 503,000. That's the breakout of the general fund expenditures. Now, what you'll notice in here is you do not have the new jail in this because the general fund itself is not the fund where the jail is being built. It's being built in a capital projects fund. That's why it only shows up in the total expenditure budget, not here. But monies in the past that you have had to contribute as the general fund portion of that jail project, they will have come through that general fund contribution sliver, going out of the general fund over to that capital project fund. Okay, so the general fund expenditure 5-year trend. Now you can see, now understand that 18-19 is still in progress, even though we're in September. We haven't closed our books for the audit purposes, so we don't have all of our accruals and everything else in here. But you can see from 14-15 through even our projected budget that the trend is up, right? We keep going up in our expenditures. Now part of this is driven by the fact that the board made a conscious decision to move towards funding the OPEB requirement. And so we have been increasing that amount by the pay-as-you-go and another 10% year after year after year. So that's contributing to this. The PERS discount rate coming down is now contributing towards these later years as well. So our expenditures are continuing up, but because we're meeting 100% of the OPEB in 1920, I would expect that portion of this trending up to now level off and even begin to drop as we set up the fiduciary, or the irrevocable trust fund is already set up, and we begin to start funding that on a regular basis to see that number come back down. We still may have some concerns or issues with our PERS because the discount rate is still going up. We don't know how that's going to be impacted yet. Just to give you some quick numbers, 17.7 million in 14-15, jumped to then 20.7 million to 23.1 million to 26.1 million. Currently in 18-19 we're down to 23.8, and we're budgeting 27.4 in 19-20. All right, this chart breaks out those categories for you, so you can see up at the top you have education, and you can see it's just a sliver. But if you're able to look that far, unlike me, I have to look in front of me. But that sliver is slightly getting larger. Okay, not drastically, but it is going up. And then the health, the public assistance and the public ways and facilities are literally non-existent. So if you don't see any colors there except that one little red splotch, that's correct. It's so small compared to the legend that it doesn't show up. The health and sanitation amount, that's going to fluctuate once again based on state and federal revenues. The public protection and the general government are the key ones there, and you're going to see that those are the drivers of the expenditure side of the county general fund budget. And you can see that those are continuing to grow in cost. Once again, that's that OPEB, the PERS, the various costs of doing business that continue to go up. This is just a different way of looking at that same information. It's breaking it more by the category itself to give you a comparison across years, so that you can see that the public protection, that you can see there the flow of that, the public assistance, the general government. And those colors are very close to public assistance and general government. So the one that you see there is general government. The one you don't see, that's public assistance, just so you know. So now we get into general fund discretionary budget. And the discretionary budget, what that means is these are general fund revenues that come into the county that are not earmarked by a specific code or initiative that was voted upon that restricts the use of these monies. For instance, if you had a victim witness grant, the victim witness grant says you have to spend it on specific earmarked functions. We can't spend that on admin. We have to spend that on the program victim witness. As opposed to a general property tax, taxes by definition mean you can spend them anywhere, they're discretionary. Those are the revenues that we get to bring to the board and say, these are the decision-making areas that we can direct where these monies go and how they're spent. So if you think about that number at the beginning, it was 131 million. Your board you get to direct about 10% of that. 90% of that is earmarked on specific functions. You still get to approve the budget appropriation authority, but it has to be approved within those little pods, if you will, of allowable expenditure areas. So the flexibility that we have as the county is very restricted in this money. This is how flexible we are. 10% of our total budget, okay? So let's have some numbers with these. General government, once again, that general fund contribution to others, you guys could probably tell me what the number is. It's 0.9 million. The general fund government is 3.3 million that's being spent. And then public protection is 8.4 million. Public ways and facilities, well, once again, it's about 59,000. Health and safety, 804,000. That's the amount of monies that the health department has brought into the general fund that has not been yet spent on their earmarked purposes. So that portion right there, that health and sanitation portion, that is earmarked. And so we're having to back that out here. That's the only piece in here that's earmarked, is the health and sanitation. Public assistance is 59,000, and then education is again $402,000. Well, before we get there, let me go back here. So, just to recap one thing real quick, because I looked at this and said, I did a discretionary revenue to you, if you guys were paying attention, I did a discretionary revenue to you of 10.9 million and discretionary expense of 13.9 million. Does that sound balanced? No, not balanced, right? The reason it's not balanced is because we use what's called a cash carry forward of revenue that had either expended expenditures or expenditures that weren't fully spent in the prior year that then roll forward in the fund balance or the cash balance to be used in the next year. We're using 3.5 million. Well, what kind of accountant are you, right? 10.9 plus 3.5 is 14.4, not 13.9. That's the $500,000 contingency amount that we put in that's not on this slide. Okay, I just wanted to show you that it does tie in case there's any confusion. All right. So what we talk about here is who is responsible for the budgets of this discretionary money. And once again, the H&HS director has 6.2%. That's really earmarked money. It's not discretionary money. Okay. So the ag commissioner has, less than 1% of that. The assessor gets about 7.7, auditor controller 13.494. You can see the percentages there, but let me talk to you about some things. So this chart is based off of budget officers of the county. So when you see auditor controller, in your mind you think finance, right? Except she's also responsible for public defender. Okay? So you don't see public defender there because it's under the auditor controller's discretion to make sure that they follow the budget. Okay? And so you can see how the distribution of the money is there. The sheriff office, the sheriff is responsible for almost 34% of the budget. Probation 8%, the DA 9%, county administrator 15%, auditor 14%. So it's quite a large group there. All right, so this is not Pac-Man, just so you know, but it does look a lot like it. This just takes those numbers we've just talked about and breaks them up. So there's the general fund expenditure budget of $27,433,000. And the non-general fund budget, those two numbers combined together do equal the $131.3 million. But it gives you a visual perception of how small our general fund budget is compared to the rest of the county's budget. And then that little round circle is breaking out that pie piece there, the blue pie piece, and breaking it into what's discretionary versus non-discretionary. So basically the green shaded part over there, that has to do with earmarked money, state, federal, intergovernmental revenues. The purple is more your taxes, the interest, that sort of thing that doesn't have strings attached to it that you can actually spend. Looking at our debt service, we were successful last year in refinancing the 2005 COPs with a private placement with 2018 Umpqua Bank. We are continuing our Trinity HUD agreement for the hospital debt that was left behind in 405. And our total payments there are $586,293. Now this isn't all of our debt service. There is like, we have a dispatch system that we pay a portion on, but these are, I restrict this presentation for the larger debt stuff that's long-term, and we're coming up on the final few budget years, if you will, of these items, as you'll see going forward. So last year we borrowed 2.3 million, $2,335,000 on October 1st, 2018. Interest rate was 3.4%. Just to give you a perspective on the savings and the good job that your county employees have done, is it was over 8%. So kudos to the treasurer, the auditor, board members, everybody that was involved, Richard, everybody that was involved on that committee. Not only did they reduce the interest, the percentage interest rate, but they also removed the restriction for budgetary reserves, although this year we haven't been able to take advantage of them. I have no idea why that's coming up. We haven't been able to take advantage of them this year, but we're hoping to in the near future. The other thing in here is the payoff. If you look at the payoff date of January 2025, the previous payoff date, was June, I believe, of 2026. So lowered interest rate, paid off faster, saving money to the budget. Great job on this one. The Trinity HUD agreement, our outstanding balance is currently $542,806. The interest is variable with the LAIF interest rate, which means interest is going up because LAIF is up compared to previous years. But we have a cap on our annual payment of $150,000 towards this debt in the agreement, and so therefore we're looking at 19, 20, and 3 additional fiscal years after that, and this will be gone. So what's happening now, as we, the elephant in the room is the jail. We're building a new jail. It's currently underway, and the state reimbursements, if they haven't already begun in 1920, they will begin shortly on getting reimbursements for the cost to pay the contractor who's working on that project. The sheriff is currently working on hiring and training additional correctional officers that are needed for the new jail opening to make sure that we meet staffing ratios required by the state and the grant that was given to us. We're currently in labor negotiations, I believe. I haven't been here for a month, so I'm assuming we're still in labor negotiations. And the impact of the class and comp on the budget and workforce is going to happen this year or next year. Whenever it happens, it's going to happen. Road projects, as we talked about, significant road projects should be either going on or soon to start. I would say that they're going on based on the delays in traffic to get up here to y'all. Once again, here's the CalPERS discount rate. We've already been through the first year. We're now in this budget going through step number 2, and then that third year is actually 0.25%, which will happen in next year's budget. Once again, we talked about the OPEB. You can see here the discount rate discussion, 6% or 3.6%. We're hoping to be at that 6% in our next actuarial OPEB report, which I believe we do this year. So that means in 2021 we should see, or we may even see it this year. I think we're going to see it in 2021, though, in reality, when that valuation will drop significantly and it'll help our balance sheet. What's on the horizons? So, every year I come and say revenue, 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 and you can see why on the flat revenue. So the opportunities that are out there is a commercial cannabis tax. And I could be mistaken on this, but I believe that Trinity County is the only county in California that allows cannabis cultivation that doesn't currently have a tax. So there may be another county, but I'm not aware of that one. I know there are some counties that don't allow cultivation that already have a tax in place in case they do at some point. Countywide fee study, I think you guys have already received the solid waste in September. I believe that you've already moved on that one. This would be the balance of the fee studies for the countywide entities such as planning department, building, environmental health, all of those that have a fee that gets charged for specific services. That study should be conducted and presented to the board for your direction, for your approval by the end of the fiscal year. The other two items are just repeat items that we have on here every year. Consider increasing the TOT from 5 to 10%. It's about $275,000 additional discretionary money. The half-cent sales tax increase, this is a good example because it would be used to fund the public safety needs of Trinity County. This is more of an earmarked money, so this is not a discretionary money, but it is additional revenue to be used for public safety and enforcement here in the county. Fiscal year 2020, 2021, the potential expenditures out there, we have approximately $3 million left that's needed to be funded by county money for one-time expenditures to complete the jail construction, potential costs, and installation of the California Dispatch Center within the new jail. We have mandatory minimum wage increases in California of $1 per year each year until it reaches $15 per hour, which for us should hit January 1 of 2022 based on the number of employees that we have.
Correct. I have a question, Supervisor.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. On the revenue opportunities, I don't see the Trinity Life Support. Is that not considered?
County.
It's not county revenue.
Okay.
It would be the specific to the life support system.
Okay.
I have a question. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Is that you?
It's fine.
Okay. Supervisor Groves?
So, the $3 million in the one-time jail fund, that is something that is that cash flow or is that more money? Because that is, if it's more money, it's something we've never heard before.
Well, I believe, and I'm going to pass off to Richard because he has the specifics on this, but just at a high level, I believe that 1.2 million of it involves a contingency and those small amounts that still need to be done on the project. And the other amount has to do with road and water sourcing to the building, dual water source, and extension of Tom Bell Road, something like that, is the other 1.6. And that's been there, my understanding is that's been a part of the project, but not part of the grant since inception.
Well, maybe I'll save this when we get to the regular.
Okay, and then the other costs here in 2021, of course, we're going to have that additional 1 million from the discount rate on the third year in 2021. So there's significant impact here in 2021, but if you notice, the majority of it, that larger number there, that $3 million number, that's a one-time hit. So I believe that after 2021, we should feel some relief in our expenditures that have been going up and away. There should be a drastic slowing to those and hopefully at least a leveling off and hopefully a little bit of a regression as we peak the mountain on OPEB and start to see that number go down. That's it for my initial presentation. We're open for any questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Always a great presentation. Whoa.
Oh, sorry, I did have one other thing because there was a question on new positions that came up about, is this on today? It's good, okay. Most of the new positions that we have approved in this budget were already there. They didn't need a new position for it, it just was funding an existing position. Okay, but there are a couple. So for instance, there's a victim advocate 2 position that we approve, that we are suggesting that you approve, that we put in the budget. It is funded and covered by the victim witness grant. There is a 3-month position in human resources because we have a retirement coming at the end of this fiscal year that we're using for succession planning to make sure that we get the handoff on the information so that they don't have to dig it all up when the person's gone. And so we are suggesting that they get that position for 3 months, and then the person will retire and we'll be back to the normal schedule. Everything else that's on here that's been approved has been existing positions on the allocation schedule. Things such as Kim Hunter as the new director. The positions that are in the sheriff and the jail as far as the correctional officers and the deputy sheriffs that are being hired, those are already there, positions already there. They're not new additional positions. We're just funding those positions that we haven't funded in the past. And then I think Susie does have a couple of changes to the budget book. I don't know if you want those now or.
Sure.
So after the budget book numbers were ran and all put together, I received a couple of requests from departments that I told them I would present to you during budget hearings for recommendation for inclusion. That I would present as, we would have included them in our proposed, but we didn't get them in time. So our request would be that if you, at the end of budget hearings, when you give us direction to go back and bring you a final budget, that these changes be included in there. There's basically two different changes. So the first 4 changes on the list are an increase for probation to replace a server for them that they needed. They're going to fund that with fund balance from their evidence and ritual. Evidence-based probation supervision, thank you. And then, so it's a transfer out and then a transfer in. And then the other one is in the copier trust to replace the large copier printer that is on the second floor of the courthouse. We just found out that one has basically died on us. We can't repair, we cannot repair it anymore. We replace it.
Those are the only two?
Those are the only, yep.
And so if I heard you correctly, they all have their funding sources
Yes,
attached to
they
it?
do. They're
Okay.
not general fund, they all have outside funding.
Okay, thank you. Any other highlights you guys wish to have it all covered?
Maybe if your questions prompt something, we can go, oh, yep, we forgot something.
Questions from the board?
Yes. Looks like there's not really going to be a problem in the future because of paying off debt. That's kind of what you indicated, that things are going to come back to normal for us after about another year to year and a half.
After 2021, we expect them to level off at that level,
Right.
which is still beyond where our revenues are.
Okay, that's what I would rather hear instead of the feeling that I got was, oh, everything's going to be hunky-dory then.
Yeah, okay, so I didn't want to give off that feeling.
That's what I figured.
What the feeling I wanted to give off was, okay, I'm tired of coming back to you and telling you, we're going up another 3 million, we're going up another 3 million. I think that climb should level off. It still leaves us a gap between the revenue we bring in and what's going out.
Okay.
And so, yes, there's
I
still.
didn't want to be left with that feeling if
No.
it wasn't. Thank
No,
you.
there's still a drastic need for discretionary revenue to be able to do things. And maybe that's a good segue then into things that don't show up in this budget, such as deferred maintenance on the county buildings.
Okay.
I won't ask for a show of hands from department heads of how many of their buildings leak during rainy season or snow, but I did read it in the narratives of here on the general services and the county administrator's office report We have been deferring maintenance because of these cost growths that are going on that we do need to address. I believe this library building needs a new roof. It's in the process of happening. You have that heating source at the courthouse that needs to be fixed. We keep patching the roof at the courthouse as well as other buildings throughout the county. So yes, there's deferred maintenance that needs to start happening or being projected. That's going to be some additional cost. Right now, we're kind of doing it as the fire, if you will, or the need arises for that leak that needs to be fixed. We then move to fix that. We need to be a little bit more proactive on that, but it's difficult in our current state of revenue budget, how much revenues we have in the budget to do that.
CAO, what are you looking for forward with this?
Well, I agree with Craig that we need to seek additional revenues, because just with our unfunded liabilities and our mandatory increases, those are fixed. We can't change the dollar per hour. And it's not only dollar per hour for our minimum wage, it is $2 an hour for our management. So that's going to be significant. I can't remember the number, but it's well over $1 million. By the time it all pans out, it could be $7 million a year increased expenses that we cannot defer.
Thank you.
So Craig, kind of going off of Supervisor Finley and then moving into Supervisor Groves. Supervisor Group. So we've also in the last few years have had some major one-time outlay of cash, mainly for the jail. If memory serves me correctly, roughly so far $2 million we've taken out of for cash match, maybe slightly more. I'm going.
No, I believe that's about
Yeah, we require 10%
$2 million.
for $2 million.
Okay. And then now we saw on the screen $3 million.
The potential of three additional
Potential
million.
three.
Yes.
So, so that is still a definite hit to our cash, along with those OPEB, which should be leveling out, but we still will have a potential of a $3 million outlay. So, there's some potential after 2021, some short time reprieve, but we still will have these items that you just stated with Supervisor Finley's question, and then this additional potential $3 million.
Correct. And depending on negotiations, results of negotiations, not only does that impact wages, it also will have a delayed impact on retirement rates. So it shouldn't impact your OPEB unless there's a new OPEB agreement in the bargain contracts. But other than that, there's definitely going to be a hit to your salaries and definitely a hit to your retirement, which is in the benefit side of it.
Okay, Supervisor Brooks?
How much PILT money are we receiving in this budget?
Just over 600,000. To put it in perspective, with that year of the spike, we got 570,000 plus 1.4 million. So we got almost 2 million in 17-18 because and the reason that we got that extra amount is because they did not do the payment to rural school roads, which then the PILT amount has to go up because they get a credit for the amount they pay. Sorry, I hit the mic. To rural school roads, they get a credit against the PILT amount they send to us as discretionary. But historically, it's been 570,000. Then we had the spike, and we called them saying, "Hey, is this the new number? Because we like it." They said, "No, it's a one-time deal." And so they said it's going to go back down to normal. But when it came back at 605, 607, 607,000.
So how do they figure that number?
Oh man, that's complicated. It's in code, but they basically take the amount of property I'm gonna oversimplify it.
Okay,
They
please.
take the amount of property that they take off of the county roll, okay, that would be subject to property tax, and then they apply a factor to it, and they give you that as PILT money, or they calculate what that PILT amount is, and then less what they pay in rural school roads money to you, they subtract that out to give you the balance.
Okay, so I wish I got to pay this tax rate of 1.5 million acres and
Well, if you were the federal government and printed your own money and had, and were sitting above us, they kind of do what the state does to us, right?
They got mad when I started printing my own money, so.
Yeah.
Okay,
Tim,
and
sir, I think.
I assume when we go budget by budget, we can get into the jail more.
Yeah.
We typically are doing that, correct? This is your time for questions on a
Yeah,
specific
I mean,
item. We're not-
we haven't put a schedule together
Yeah,
to have
remember, it's not-
each
that
department come up and go
format's
line by
changed.
line on
Right.
that.
All right,
But-
so let's,
If you have specific questions for
Now's the time.
departments, we can do our best to answer them based on our discussions and more than welcome them to the podium.
well, so let's dive into the jail because I'm a little shocked by these numbers. The last number we were given is we were going to need another 1.6.
Rick is in the room, but I asked him to sit down because I'll try to explain it so I understand it as opposed to Rick's numbers, which sometimes be confusing, even though they're accurate.
Well,
We'll bring them up, he's already confused us.
I will say we were originally told a pipeline was going to cost 80,000. Now we're being told it's costing $500,000. These are, even in our budget, we show we only need 200,000. Or, excuse me, 2,200,000. So yeah, go ahead and explain why this is skyrocketed up. And
Keith, what page are you on?
this is page 133.
Well, in the end, I will have to call Rick up. I'll go ahead and do
Give it a
the
shot.
overview. 3 million is an estimate. Out of that 3 million, 1.3 is unfunded that we needed to complete the grant for the VSCC.
Okay, I'm stuck right there.
Yes.
So we've already met our 10%.
And then some, yes.
And then some. So why do we need another 1.3 to fill in for?
Because the cost of the jail was above what was the remaining of the,
Okay, so this is the shortfall.
yes. So the 20 million minus whatever the state takes out was just for a building. Doesn't include the special equipment we need for dispatch and doesn't include site prep. It's up to us to have a shovel-ready site, which means we have to improve Tombell Road, we have to put the water loop around, all that kind of stuff. It's all part of the county's obligation. They're just going to give us a building and a key. They're not going to give us the additional funding for the site prep. So the 1.3 million is essentially exactly our contingency because there's an $18.6 million construction bid. And if you multiply that by 7%, that's the 1.3 million contingency. So our hope is that we won't tap into that funding. So of this, the 1.3 we won't use because historically, Button Construction's come in on time and on budget. One of the reasons we're glad that they did. The architect budget came in exactly what the bid was for the jail. It gives us confidence that we're accurate in our construction plans. And lastly is the bids came in very, very close. In many bids this size, you'll have a $2 or $3 million discrepancy between the high bid, low bid. We had $1 million between the high and low, but we don't have $300,000 between first and second. So that makes us also feel very confident that we're on target for the construction of this jail site. So that $1.3 million is contingency, which the state required you have a contingency. So that's what we asked that. The rest of it is that the site prep, and then the unknown is the dispatch again. Within the jail, they're building us a dispatch center, but our equipment that we need to put in there is not included. And the sheriff's been working very, very hard in working with Motorola and suppliers that we feel somewhat to fairly confident that much of that can be funded through the purchase, not through general fund, where Motorola will cover self-funded, much like they did with the upgraded dispatch. And then there's OES funding out there that we're going to apply for. Fortunately, we'll knock on wood, it's been a very minimal year in fires and disasters. So the OES budget, what they've done is they put so much into the OES budget, and then funds left over, they allow counties to apply for a dollar match. And they do tend to fund communications. That's one of the things that OES will fund. So there's a high probability that we can apply for OES funds, the dollar for dollar match. to also help pay for the dispatch. So this 3 million is a worst-case scenario, but we wanted to make it, bring it to the board's attention that it's a possibility. But we're doing everything in our power to reduce that down. If you want specifics, that's what I want to bring Rick up to give actual specifics.
Well, what I would like is a breakdown, cost by cost, not today, of the worst-case scenario until this jail is made.
I can give you that very scary number.
And so, because we get all these numbers that are flying around, and I just have a feeling that I'm buying a used car, and then the guy says, oh, by the way, did you want an engine with that? So, that way I can track it easier in my mind.
So what we can do is we can give you well, with the dispatch, that's still going to be difficult. We're still.
At least
we don't
there's a
know
line
that.
item for it.
But we can give you the numbers that we anticipate, and then we can also put in where we think the funding is coming from.
Okay.
So, you
Go
finished
ahead.
real quick, sir, going after something you said. My recollection was that dispatch was going to remain over there initially in the design. Am I remembering that correctly?
Is that correct?
Uh-huh.
The issue with that is that we have, it's 6 one and half dozen another. If we leave dispatch in the current facility, then we have to hire 5 more officers because
I
our
see.
professional officers are also dispatched.
Right.
So we'd have to hire 5 additional officers to sit at this side. So we either have a one-time large expense or an ongoing expense. And we believe that bite the bullet and try and take out the one-time expenses is the best route to go. Because in the long term, we don't have to hire those 5 additional officers.
So could we get that presentation on the cost of the jail in the October meeting? You know, a breakout of everything from cash match to
So
future
the first one might be
potential.
difficult, but you
Or
know,
second.
calendar, the dates are
For the second in October.
probably, yeah, the 15th would be a more likely target, yes, we can.
Okay. So,
Yes.
all right. Any other questions on jail? Oh, Supervisor Chen.
I just wanted to make a comment because earlier it was stated that this is difficult to understand and it's like Cantonese. And I think, I don't know how many times you've taken your time generously with me and Susie and Dr. Richards and Mike Martin, who's no longer with us. But you have sat down for an hour with Susie to learn that after I met with her, I had a whole nother list of questions, and she's like, anytime. So I remember the first time I was told to go upstairs and get a warrant, I thought for sure I was innocent. So, the debit means it could be positive, and the credits can have a negative, and it is. So I just wanted to say thank you. I appreciate it, and I'm sure you'll be seeing more of me. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
So yeah, I'd like to go into the cannabis on page 174. Last meeting, we were asked for information on the cannabis budget. And, some of the cannabis people, and I said, come to this meeting, and I don't see them. I think it's important for people to note that this program originally built up some pretty good reserves as we were ramping up, and now we are ramped up, and we're cutting into those reserves rather significantly. We do have a lot of one-time costs, so where this shakes out in future years, it's going to be yet to be seen, but in this budget, we're eating into the reserves almost $1 million. And so I just wanted that to be noted for everybody on the board and the public that had complained about, us having all this money sitting there. We are now eating that up rather rapidly.
And I would further add that those reserves were as a result of ramping up staffing. I mean, staffing does not catch up with revenue initially, and finding folks to help. Even the senior planner position's been a very difficult one to fill, so, but we have Kim now, and so, no pressure, Kim. She's hiding back there. Okay, any other questions? Any questions from the public? No, departments? No? Susie, looks like you have no?
I do want to thank Susie for her generous time the other day. As she sees me coming, she's like, oh my God.
She hides under her desk.
Oh my God, Supervisor, may I help you? So thank you, Susie. You've matured greatly in this role, and I appreciate it.
Yes, thank the whole budget team, and again, all the department heads and managing your budgets. It's, appreciate all the great teamwork. And again, a great presentation, Craig. It's very helpful for everybody. Any other further questions before I would entertain a motion? No? Entertain a motion? Are you ready?
Absolutely.
Okay, very good.
A motion to approve the budget as presented.
Do you want to include the?
Yes, the items that Susie brought forward. Okay,
With this included?
with that included, a motion to approve this budget and bring it back for final approval.
I'll second.
Okay, please pull the board.
Supervisor Jones?
Aye.
Supervisor Finley?
Aye.
Supervisor Brown?
Aye.
Supervisor Childs?
Aye.
Supervisor Moore?
Yes. All right. Thank you again for everyone's work. And again, all the departments continue the great work. Meeting is adjourned.